Welcome back, everyone, to Nopes and Opes. I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Hylan.
Yeah.
No Lance, of course. He's back at home, probably enjoying life and being very spoiled by my mother.
Hopefully.
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah. Being spoiled for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
That's without a doubt.
Today we're gonna talk about an interesting topic. Now I'm a little cautious. One, because it's kind of like it's a weird thing to talk about, at least for me. But I'm excited to explore it on the podcast, right?
Oh man.
So it is the month of
my heart rate just raised quite a bit. Okay.
So it is the month of November, right? And I have been doing a lot of lifting and kind of like self-development and whatnot. And part of me lifting and looking at certain things on YouTube, I start to get a specific algorithm created, right? And it is very...
Oh, that feeds you videos.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, on YouTube.
Okay.
I don't have any other social media. YouTube's like my one thing because I like to use it to be like, oh, what kind of like lift can I do? You know, like different workout routines and all that stuff.
Okay.
But with that being said, all of the content that's being curated to me now is very like masculine about being a man and like all of these. And I'm starting to see like the toxic masculinity things.
Okay.
And part of it, I was like, okay, what are they saying? Right. And part of the podcast I listen to, Diary of a CEO, there's certain people that come on that talk about this specific topic and kind of the benefits and whatnot. And so one of the things,
the benefits of toxic masculinity?
No, not what I'm gonna get into right now.
Sorry.
So have you ever heard of NoFap?
NoFap is about I think, is it only like no masturbation in regards to men, or is it to everybody?
I think it's men. I don't mean to generalize that it's not women, but like what I've seen, it's men.
Actually, I disagree. That's what it is, though, right?
Yeah. So NoFap is no masturbating for men, right?
What does NoFap is a acronym?
No. FAP, it just says another word for masturbating. One of the reasons why it's given the name FAP is because of like the sound of like fap. Yeah.
Okay.
But as I like to say it, based on Seinfeld, being the master of your domain.
Okay. Yeah.
We can say it that way.
Yeah, because that like even saying that made me uncomfortable.
A lot of the videos I'm seeing are like catered towards that. And it being the month of November, there was this kind of like tradition that was made, I don't know why, called No Nut November, which implies like no sex, no fap, all of that stuff.
Oh, man.
For men, right?
Okay.
And so I'm getting all of these things sent to me and whatnot. And I even was talking with one of my good friends when I was, because I'm like trying to date and whatnot and all this stuff. And he was telling me that like, hey, like you should stop like masturbating. And I'm like, come again? Well, not again, but what? And he was like,
come not at all.
Yeah, exactly. And he was talking about this something called semen retention, which is another word for like just not masturbating, right? So this is an episode about masturbating.
Oh.
Thanks for tuning in. Mom, Dad, please don't listen to this episode.
Wow.
But
I was not prepared for this.
Yes, okay. I know. The reason why I'm bringing it up is because I, as not being on social media and whatnot, I'm seeing all of, like, I know it's an algorithm. I know it's all catered to a certain thing. And I'm seeing all these things. I'm seeing this toxic masculinity about just like lifting, not really caring about women. Just like, there's the stuff called like the winter arc. Like during the winter, you just like, you go away, you don't talk to anyone, you lift as much as you possibly can, and you come back, and people are like, oh my God, you've changed so much. Like, I'm seeing all of these kind of things. And NoFap is a part of it because what they're saying, the community is saying, like, if you don't masturbate, you increase your testosterone, you don't think about women so much, and you kind of like start to get a sense of self, and you're not constantly like chasing after women, right? So I hear all this and I go like, okay, you know what? As an experiment, I am going to follow this. So I have been not masturbating, and I'd like to talk about that today. And kind of get into my findings, because what they talk about it, right? And here's the thing. The only reason I'm trying it is because I'm like, is this total bullshit? I watched Diary of CEO by Stephen Bartlett is a fantastic podcast. Once you get done listening to all of our episodes, you should then watch his podcast and then make sure you come back for ours because we don't want to lose you as a viewer. But he has on urologists, he has on doctors that deal with kind of like uh, the actual brain function of masturbating and like having sex, and they talk about it, and they have found that like there's not really any concrete findings on whether it increases your testosterone or if it's good for you, right? But this community believes that it is so beneficial for you. And even my friend with like the whole semen retention, that's the same concept. He was saying like, he just felt more confident for some weird reason. Like women could like sense it. And then like he
Yeah.
was, more approachable and everything. So I was like, all right, I don't know what any of this means, but for an experiment, I am going to follow this discipline for some time just to see
For,
and
Nov-
gather my own findings.
for November?
Right. Well, I started in October and now we're getting into November.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
but as a discipline, I'm like for sure, like because it started later in October. I don't know the exact date,
Yeah.
and then I was like, all right, from November on, none,
Oh.
just to see if anything,
Okay.
happens if I discover any, interesting thing about myself. Now, my current findings, the exact opposite of what is supposed to happen. I think about sex so much more than I did before.
Okay. Okay.
Um, confidence wise, don't really know if that's happening. I mean, all the confidence work I'm doing is kind of based on my own thing. I don't think it's just because I'm not masturbating and whatnot. But yeah, lifting wise, I mean, I've been lifting a lot. I don't think it necessarily has increased my lifts or anything like that. But it's just funny because it's such a weird thing to do and to share with people. I'm also surprised I'm sharing this on the podcast. I don't really want people to know about this.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I
Yeah, initial thoughts here.
think this is a pretty, I, I, I think it's actually a super interesting topic, and I have fluctuated tremendously between the two. Like, I think because I mean, I guess like if we're gonna get so vulnerable stories, I mean, like I haven't been like intimate with a girl for years, like 10, 12, 15 years, like for a long time until recently. Like recently I have, but and so like I kind of went through this whole process and I can kind of see where it came from because you do uh yeah, I mean, like it's gonna take me a second to gather my thoughts
That's
about all
fine.
this because it is a really interesting topic to me. And in my journey of being kind of, I guess, celibate for so long is that like pornography and kind of like taking pleasure into your own hands really like literally was that was your only option, right?
Mhm.
And so and the crazy oh man, this is gonna get so personal so quick.
Well, I can say more things if you don't want to get there yet. We can
No,
we can hold off if
I
you
mean
want.
I think it's really cool. Like I hope we both go there because I think this is actually like if we want to reach people, and this may turn off women. Like women may not be so.
I'm gonna be honest. This episode is for the men. This is not for you ladies. If you'd like to listen, feel free.
Well,
But I
and
don't think it's gonna really connect with you.
but I think too, I would hope that there's kind of an exploration of trying to understand things, right?
Yeah.
Like trying to get to a point. So hopefully there's information for everybody. But yeah, I think for me, like my personal journey is I have always like pornography, unfortunately. Well, not unfortunately, like that's kind of the essence of this whole thing for me is that there's always been kind of this use. It's always been a part of my life, and
Yeah.
at some points I've worried, like Highland, like
Is
whoa,
it a problem
yeah,
or
is
something?
this way too much? And
Yeah.
then so I understand where this no fap or whatever kind of movement has come from.
Yeah.
Like there is always this kind of searching, like what the heck? Am I
Yeah.
just overdoing it?
A lot of the things that are talked about on that Diary of a CEO podcast is that there's a lot of shame and guilt catered around
Yeah.
it because people struggle with watching too much porn or not value themselves. And so that's why NoFap starts as a thing is it's kind of like a quitting it cold turkey. But the problem is, and what they talk about it on it is like the ramifications of like, oh, if you have like what's called like a nighttime emission, which is essentially like a wet dream, and the urologist was like, then you'll be like shamed in the community because there's like Reddit communities you can talk about it. I'm not a part of those. This is like my own personal experiment. Highland's part of my community. I guess you're learning about it. But I'm just doing it as like on my own experiment. No one else needs to know about it except for I guess everyone on the
Yeah,
podcast.
except for everyone on the internet.
Yeah. But the thing that's interesting is that when because they talk about whether or not it's a positive thing and whatnot, and they have found it's been positive for certain individuals when it be kind of comes a point of discipline and kind of like taking matters in your own hands when you feel like you can't really control things like with addiction and whatnot because
Yeah.
some people are very much addicted to porn or
Yeah.
addicted to sex or maybe just even addicted to masturbating in general
Yeah,
like they
yeah,
just
yeah.
they want to escape their life they do that to escape it feel the
Yeah.
dopamine right
Yeah, yeah.
and so, like we had talked about in the dopamine episode, I, read that book. I listened to this podcast. I saw all these things, all these people talking about it. I was like, okay, this would be an interesting thing to see because naturally you get a flood of dopamine when you do orgasm and whatnot. And so you can abuse that in a way to like, oh, I'm not feeling good. Let me just get a hit of dopamine.
Yeah, yeah.
Or, let me look at social media. Let me look at, beautiful women online, whatever it may be. Right. And so that's kind of what started all of this. But the shame and guilt that's associated with it is very negative.
Yeah.
Right. If you do this and you're like, yeah, if you have a nighttime emission, by the way, you're all just said like, if your body is gonna have a wet dream, like it will have one. There's like nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
Like if you wake up, you can't be like, oh my gosh, I'm such a terrible person that this happened. It's like, no, dude, your body, like you're not in control. You're asleep. Like
Yeah.
it happens to you. Like it's okay.
Yeah.
Right. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the
Well,
basis of
for
this
me,
journey.
I mean, like my interest in this is the shame and guilt aspect, right? Like because for me, there's a like my relationship with this topic, like especially with pornography, there's huge, like unbelievable, like I just an unbelievable amount of shame and guilt because one, I try to I don't want to say pretend, but I try to elevate like all people, right? But I don't know if I pretend necessarily to elevate women, but I feel like that. Like there's that like oh Highland, like in the outward words and actions and stuff, you're saying oh I'm a big proponent and I'm
Yeah.
like in favor
But
of
behind closed
women.
doors, you
Yeah,
do the opposite.
and then you're objectifying and you're doing all these crazy things, and
Yeah.
then like that's where the conflict right arises. Like oh in the outer image you're portraying this
Mhm.
but the reality is this and it
Yeah.
does not line up and for me that's been the biggest struggle and I think excuse me one of the things like as I've gotten older is that I have um been able to I guess control things a little bit
Yeah.
and I've really realized for me that pornography is really detrimental and not a good uh just path for me like it leads me to places that I don't want to go and
Yeah.
there is the immediate release but I think the after effects are more like okay there's this positive but the negatives are way
Yeah.
more
Tips the scale.
yeah
Way more
and
pain than actual pleasure.
yeah and so for me but it's taken me 50 years to get to that point and even now like I guess there's relapses or whatever. Like this
Yeah.
is so strange to have this
I
conversation.
know. I started. That's why I was like, yeah, this could be a weird one.
Yeah, for sure. But I think it's really valuable. Like I want to have this conversation and I want to be open about it and I want to like be vulnerable in a way that's beneficial to people. But um yeah, so like at this point for me, it's really beneficial not to partake in pornography, and I see, like, I would like for younger men not to do that, but at the same time, like, if I said to my 26-year-old self, "Hey, don't do this.
Yeah.
Like, this is not detrimental," I would get the most rude negative response ever. I would be like, I would say, my 50-year-old self,
What do
like,
you know?
yeah, kind of like, like, good luck, man. Like that's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
I,
I don't
I'll
know.
I'll talk a little bit. So like I have watched porn. I'm not gonna sit here and say I've never seen it. I don't know what you're talking about. So I have watched pornography before, and when I first had become single and whatnot, I think the intake of pornography went up because I was lonely,
Yeah,
and that just it happens. But since I've been kind of like on all this discipline and as a member of NoFap, um, I have not watched like any pornography because I eventually got to a point where I was like, hey, I don't think like with social media, I don't think that this is a benefit to me. I don't think this is good for me. I think it is creating such a desire around when it comes to dating and flirting to have like sex be at the forefront of my mind,
mm,
and I don't want it to be. That's also one of the reasons why I was like, "Oh, let me try this," because that's what it's supposed to be. The side effects is you like don't look at women in that light anymore. You kind of just like you don't objectify. You don't. Sex is not at the forefront of your brain. Not to say like when I walk around, that's all I'm thinking about. But in terms of finding someone attractive and wanting to flirt with them, the human nature is to want to have sex and whatnot.
mm,
So
yeah,
as an attempt to like lessen that and make sure it's like, no, I want to treat you as a normal human being and see if there's a connection. Just if there's banter, if it's fun and it's exciting and whatnot. And so that's kind of been like what I've been doing. And I'm excited to give more updates in the future. Like at the end of November,
yeah.
I think I'd like to give another update and whether or not I'll continue or whatnot. But it's just very, very interesting. And one thing I have to say is like, so we're not experts, we're not doctors. The Diary of a CEO podcast with Stephen Bartlett, they have 3 episodes specifically that I watched that all kind of cater to this. They have one where it's this gentleman, Dr. Mike, who talks a lot about pornography use in people and kind of like the repercussions of it,
Can you kind of
men
summarize
specifically.
like the three? Like, what are the, like, if you remember, like, what
So,
do you remember
uh,
from the three?
um, I
Because
mean,
I'm super interested in this because I think like from
we're gonna. I think we should watch it. I think definitely you would get something from watching it. So
well, I think, but like so for the sole purpose of this
yeah,
specific episode, I think for me, the negative aspects of pornography are huge, and especially for young men
yeah,
in society. And I think like I- I'd be interested in the summary, but at the same time, like just you and I kind of discussing like, hey, what do we like as generational
yeah,
differences? Like, what do we see, and what do you personally find in
yeah,
your like younger life? Because I think I've gotten to the point where I can like somewhat manage like this aspect, and I no longer have the effects of this. Um, but yeah, I think this is fascinating because I think unfortunately the kind of ubiquitousness of pornography and just the just the omnipresence of the sexualization
hmm
of just society and just social media and movies and things like that. I just think like for me, kids are consuming things at an age where they just should not
yeah.
know about these
So
things.
to generalize a lot of the things they talk about. So Dr. Mike talks. So he's incredibly well articulated, very interesting individual. So he is a behavior psychologist, and he deals a lot with addiction. He himself was addicted to video games, and he deals a lot with men and like addiction to porn and
How old
whatnot.
is he?
He's probably in his 40s,
Okay.
around that age.
Okay.
He could be his late 30s. I don't
Okay.
necessarily know. So in his episode, right, he talks with Stephen Bartlett. about pornography and nofap and kind of like the implications with men, right? It's
Mm.
mostly kind of catered towards around men. Those are the patients he's seeing. Those are the people that are having the problem. Not to say that women don't have problems with addiction to porn and whatnot. They can as well. But specifically, this episode's going to be catered around just kind of like the male perspective, right? So he talks a lot about just that. He talks about the age range people are now seeing pornography as young as 11 years old,
Oh,
accidentally being seeing that kind of thing,
yeah.
right? And
Yeah,
it
yeah.
just can affect you, right? And the kind of the reward system based on it and how accessible pornography
Yeah.
is nowadays.
Yeah, yeah.
Like any kid with a phone, and kids are getting phones younger and younger,
Yeah.
or an iPad, can get access to any porn site they
Yeah,
really
yeah.
want. If they just look up the word porn, flooded,
Yeah.
flooded with things, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so he talks about that. He talks about kind of the shame and guilt around nofap. They ask the question of like, is not masturbating a beneficial thing? He kind of gives the statistics on whether or not it actually does, if there are any findings and whether it helps. He does that. He did study for 8 years to become a Buddhist monk. So he
Mm.
talks about kind of the Buddhist monk perspective of it because there's certain practices that kind of deal with abstaining from sex and whatnot, which is he has an interesting perspective on. And then there is another episode with this female doctor who is a urologist, and she deals a lot with just kind of like sexual health and trying to help people like have a healthier sex life, ensuring that there's communication and everything. Right?
Mm.
She also gets into kind of the idea of nofap, if whether or not it increases your testosterone, kind of the actual science behind it versus the kind of whereas Dr. Mike's is more about kind of the emotional response to all of these.
Mm.
Then they have a third episode, which is fantastic, where Dr. Mike from the first episode is on. The second doctor, the I can't remember her name, and I should get her name, and I'll include it into the podcast description. She's on, and then they have a third guest who is actually
All together.
all together. They're all sitting down with Steven. The
Okay.
third guest, um, another female who I can't remember her name, she'll be in the podcast description. She is actually a director and owner of a porn studio that makes adult content. And so they kind of have this open discussion about pornography
Oh
and
man.
whether or not it's beneficial, whether it's not. And one of the coolest findings is like, to some degree, right? Because from a performer aspect, like some of the women and men that are actors that are making these films, they think of it as an art form, right? Right. So there's kind of this justification of like, hey, I'm doing this because I find it to be beautiful. I find that it is a connection. I think it can help couples, like if you watch it alone, there's a lot more bad repercussions from it. But then if you watch it in kind of like a partner setting, it actually can elevate your sexual experience and it can be an enjoyable thing. And one cool finding from that episode, which the whole episode there, it's a very fascinating and enjoyable discussion. But they talk about erotic films versus actual pornography videos, right? And erotic films are kind of this a lot because it's like an hour long and it's not just rushing into like the instant hit of dopamine that you get from like social media. It's more of kind of like reading an erotic novel versus, watching a porn video. The erotic novel, there's build up, there's, kind of the emotions, the tenseness, the ups and downs. Same thing with an erotic film. And they were kind of saying like that's kind of a better way to like stop watching so much porn is like to switch to that because it's long form. There's kind of the weighting of it and whatnot. So those are like the generals summary of all three episodes. There is so much more to the episodes, and there's so much more that I'm leaving out, but that's kind of the general basis. And before you ask your first question, let's take a break.
Okay.
So earlier I was trying to think of the names. So the specific episode of the Diary of a CEO is called "The Big Porn Debate." Three experts debate the unseen dangers of nofap. The adult industry is exploiting our brains. Now porn will change your brain. And the three experts are, and I might butcher these names, but it's Dr. Alok Kanoja, maybe. They're a Harvard trained psychiatrist and president and co founder of Healthy Gamer. Then there's Dr. Rena D. Malik, is a urologist and sexual health expert. And then there's Erica Luss, who is an erotic film director, screenwriter, and producer and founder of Erica Lust Films. So those are, and Dr. K was the male that I was talking about in the first episode. Dr. Alina was the second episode. And then the third episode is that specific one where they have all three together
Oh,
having this kind of debate.
that's brilliant. Yeah. No, like when you read that to me, like my immediate response was the hidden dangers of NoFap. I think
Hmm.
that's also interesting because for me, I think and this is so interesting because I go back and forth all the time. Like I
Yeah.
don't have a definitive answer like, "Oh, you should do this, you should do that." And not even for myself. I don't even have a definitive answer for what I want to do because I think like I don't know if I have suppressed my sexuality
All
for a
right.
long
All right.
time,
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
but
do that.
oh no worries. But I just think like to me, and I think we both kind of align in this regard, but like sex is important, I think to both of us.
Yeah.
And I think it's a huge aspect of our kind of personalities and lives and thoughts and things like that. And I think that's very healthy. And I think there's like a for myself, like a pretty healthy sex drive for sure. But yeah, so I've been struggling with this for 50 years and I'm still not to any conclusion. But I'm super interested in different perspectives because this is something that I have spent a lot of time thinking about and trying to resolve and just have not gotten there.
Yeah. Well,
So
and
I
it
would
was
be
it was
interested.
interesting because my buddy had mentioned like, the whole semen retention thing, which is again the same thing as NoFap. The idea is that you're holding your semen in, not releasing it, and there's like some kind of benefit from the male perspective. Um and he just had like made quick mention of it because like he does really well with women, right? He's 6'2", charismatic guy.
So you're the same height?
Exactly. Same height, right? So he does better than I do. And so he really is smooth, right? He's a smooth individual. He's has a lot of confidence and whatnot. Not that I
And he's
don't
just
have
a nice
confidence.
guy too.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah.
And so he was saying that like that really helped him. And I was like, well, I don't know if that is BS or not. If it's just some kind of like placebo effect or what. And
Well, I
so
mean, like if you get a confidence boost from just thinking like, hey, like I've done this, like
yeah,
this is
like I'm being
like
disciplined,
I'm
I'm
yeah,
mastering it, master of my domain.
yeah, I don't yeah,
That's
I
where
think that's an interesting
in
concept
the
to think through.
episode,
Like, is it a placebo or is there
yeah.
real confidence boost?
And
Is there
that's
real
where in the episode they talk about that's one of the positive sides of it. Like if you feel that confidence and you feel like you're taking control,
yeah,
that's good. The negative, the unseen danger is the shame and guilt. Where like if you relapse or you do masturbate, you're sinning. You're a terrible person. Like how could you do this? Like you held out for so long.
yeah,
You didn't give in and then you did it. And so kind of the way I'm treating is I'm so laid back about it. I'm like, you know what? I am just seeing if I eventually go like, you know what, this is not for me. Like I'm gonna masturbate. I'm not gonna be like all the work that you've done. I'm like, no, like this doesn't matter. And besides, if I get a female partner, I won't worry about it anymore because like I'm eventually going to have sexual relations and whatnot, and so then it's not really a matter. But it's usually for like men who are single that struggle with women and they try to find this sense of community and like that's where like all the things with comes with lifting and the things that are kind of like put to me in the algorithm are very much like no fap, you know, respecting yourself, not respecting, not like taking yourself for granted. And that's kind of what we talked about in the last episode
yeah,
with kind of like that dating esque story is that at the end of the night, I was like, you know what? No, like I have higher standards for myself. I'm not going to like give in to this idea of, bending over backwards to, just get that kind of pleasure of a date or dancing with someone and all that stuff.
yeah. No, I think I mean these are huge concepts actually. I think valuing yourself, respecting yourself is where I kind of fluctuate back and forth because I think in some regards, like if I if I lose a discipline, whatever, and like I relapse or whatever it is, like like I don't think of it that way anymore. Like I just
Yeah.
and that's kind of the nice thing about being older is I just really don't care too much. Like I'm just like, hey, Island, like this is just a natural part of life. But um yeah, I just think for me, like that's always been the point of contention. Like, is this natural? Is this necessary? Is this something that like needs to be released as opposed to is this a sin? Like for me, I guess on a personal level, I was taught from a very young age, I guess Christianity, and I still even like my personal kind of religious thoughts about things is I do think there's a God, and I do think that being is looking down on me and taking care of me, and that there's angels all around me, and this and that. And like when I'm in my most intimate moments, man, I just can like I imagine that like people up in heaven or wherever they are just looking down like or like I mean
Baba and
I
Bappa.
shared this before, yeah, like my grandma and grandpa, I call them Bama and Bapa, are just looking down and just shaking
Highland,
their
come on.
their heavenly being, just being like, oh, Island, like we thought we raised you better.
Yeah.
And so I mean that's like how much of it the shame and guilt, well, no, I mean, all of it is forced upon us,
Yeah.
right? From external sources, right? It's from
Yeah.
society, whatever it is. And I think that's where it becomes really difficult to balance out like what are my own personal thoughts and feelings as
Yeah.
opposed to what has been forced upon me through society and like social media and religion and teachings and school and things like that. And yeah, man, I've never gotten to a point where I'm like, yep, this is the answer. Like I got this. Like
Yeah.
this is how I feel. Like I still, even to this day, and I don't know how to handle it. And the thing that really worries me is like I'm comfortable in at my point, like at 50 years old, but I do all the time. I say this probably once a week, but I just say like if I was a teenage boy in middle school right now and I had access to all of the things that
Oh,
these kids have access to, I would
be over.
I would I would I, I might be in jail. I don't know where I'd be, right? Like I would be failing
Yeah.
miserably,
Yeah.
right? Like I remember like as a kid, my friend and I somehow got a hold of a magazine. Like my friend always had like access to magazines, man. Like, but like my mom found it somehow. Like it was underneath my bed. My mom found it, and I mean, talk about shame and guilt. And I mean, this was like one of the most graphic magazines ever. And I just remember like trying to blame it on my friend, and which worked really well because he kind of had the reputation of like,
He
oh
was the
yeah,
bad
of
influence.
course, like
Yeah.
he would bring this over to my child, like my angel like child's house. And
Right.
but in the end I just remember like because my mom was just like she was crying and she was like
Oh no.
Highland, and I just remember, I mean maybe this was the start of the journey of like taking responsibility, but she's like, Highland, is this your friends? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I would never. And then I was like, Mom, I'm sorry. Like we were like, like it's mine too. I, I
Take
mean, it's
ownership.
in, yeah, it's in my bed. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like we were both, and I just remember that was so horrible. It was so heartbreaking. Like, I
Yeah.
just destroyed my mom's heart that day.
I
And
have a funny story too in regards to like pornography. So this is around high school and like the discovery of porn and whatnot. So like occasionally I might watch porn, right? At high school. And I had watched it and it was still kind of like on my phone, like queued, if you will, right? Like I had just turned my phone off, but like the video was like still kind of there, right? And so
oh,
me and Emmett got to go to lacrosse practice. And
oh,
we like to listen to music on the way to on the way to lacrosse. And
oh,
we get in the car and the radio's on, and I just like plug my phone in immediately.
yeah,
And what it does is it automatically plays the first music or audio that is
lined up
lined up. And so
in the queue.
I turn on the car, I plug it in, and immediately it is the sounds of lovemaking,
Passionate
if you will.
lovemaking.
And I just am like, so quickly, like, what the heck? And Emmett looked
Who
at me.
put that on my
Emmett looked
phone?
at me. I was like, wow, that must have been like some ad or something. Like you backpedal. You're like, I have no idea what that is.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it was so like taboo and whatnot. And I just was like, after that moment, I was like, oh, never again. But yeah, like the shame and guilt from it, it was palpable. It was like, oh no.
Oh, it's horrible,
Yeah.
right? And that I think that's also a very funny topic. Like what you struggle with independently in your own
Hmm.
time, right? But then if you get caught, like that's a whole that's just like
Yeah.
a whole nother level, right?
Like
Like that's
my buddy I was talking about earlier, who's really smooth with women. We were over at his house, and he has an older brother who's a friend of ours as well. And the younger brother was on the like home computer, and we were all like watching YouTube or something, and
oh god,
he decided to look at the search history. And he started reading off all of the search history. And it was like, big booty babes, like all just
yeah,
like, and it was like childlike searches.
yeah.
It wasn't like graphic. It was just kind of like, you know, ridiculous things. He was reading them off, and then they fought because the older brother came down and they got all mad and they got this whole confrontation. But the younger brother, he just was laughing. He just was dying laughing. And I was like, so kind of like awkwardly like, what is happening? But now when we look back on it, we talk about it, we all laugh and have a good time.
Well, I mean, I just like I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like we're having this conversation and we're treating it kind of nonchalantly, like it's like, oh, okay, is this good, bad, natural, this, that, whatever. And so I just want to take a chance. For me personally, like I have consumed pornography, and I think in that action, like you are kind of objectifying women. And I think in that regard, like I personally want to kind of put out an apology, or just like 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 I try to pretend that I'm perfect. Like I try to, like, in my outward appearance, I try to pretend like I got everything. Like like you try to portray,
Yeah.
but the reality is we're all flawed. We're all human beings. Like congratulations, you are a human being. But in that essence, like in having this conversation, and like we are laughing and we're telling funny stories and stuff, and
Yeah.
we're like, I by no means want to like condone my actions or
Yeah.
say that they were incorrect, or I mean correct, or anything like that. Like I do realize that in my life, in my actions, in my kind of choices that I've made, I have like been hypocritical. Like
Yeah.
I said certain things in public and then done other things in private.
Yeah.
And I just want to like make it very clear to women that I do take this seriously, and I do worry about this, and I do kind of, in essence, I think that I have done some wrong things, and I want to say, like, apologize for that. And so, yeah, just take that moment.
Yeah.
I by no means do I think that this is funny, or
Yeah.
like I think this is a very serious topic, and I think it deserves. I think I think it deserves conversations, and I think in any healthy relationship, this is something that should be discussed, because I think a lot of the shame and guilt. Well, actually, this is it's creating all these different thoughts, but in
Can I say something before you get into this?
oh my god, absolutely, please. Otherwise, I'm okay. Go.
All right. So yeah, if to this story is gonna relate to what we're talking about. So you remember how I was telling you like I got into lifting.
Yeah.
This was off the podcast. And there was this certain dude that kind of like had this beginner program that just kind of like helped me get started.
Mm,
Right. And it was this younger kid, right? He was like 20 years old.
yeah. Nice.
Dude is ripped. He
Good.
looks fantastic. I watched this video. I was like, if you're doing that and you look like that, I'm game.
Yeah.
So I watched this video, and like he has some knowledge, but at the same time, he's no expert. I take everything with a grain of salt. This is the internet. He is very young, you know, whatever. So I take some of the information that I like and I think that is good. And then I watched more of his videos to be like, okay, what is this guy all about? Like, he has this body that's like a sculpted like a Greek god. Like, what does he post about?
Yeah.
And he talks about like how to, the things that are important to gaining muscle. And one section of his video is about masturbating. And I was like, huh. And this is when I had been listening to like the NoFap and all the podcasts, and I was like, all right, what are his thoughts, right?
Yeah.
And he talks about there's this specific video that he shares where it's Vegeta from Dragon Ball, which is an anime that I'm a fan of. And he's like, yeah, Vegeta talks about the importance of it. You should watch that video. And I'm like, hold on a second. I watched all of Dragon Ball. There was never a time when that was mentioned. So I'm like, what is this video? So I look it up. And what it is it's so Vegeta is a iconic voice actor, and they use AI to make a script, and it's Vegeta saying all of these things
Oh.
about how bad it is to masturbate,
Oh.
and how through the years they've said it's a positive thing, but it makes men weak. It makes you less than. And I was like, I watched like a minute of it, and I was like, oh, this is a really bad message for men.
Mm.
Like it's super negative because it makes you feel so shameful and guilty for ever masturbating, right? So this is this one video that he posts and he kind of talks about it. I'm like, okay, so this kid's got something going on with the shame and guilt for masturbating, right? Because he says like, I don't because it helps lifting by not doing it, right? And so then he posts a newer video and he talks about this experience he had where he had this like really hard time, and he mentioned how he's a very Christian man and whatnot, and he's very much of the Christian faith, and then he confesses that like he has been masturbating and he's been lying about it, and
Oh.
you can see the shame and guilt so palpable in his
Oh.
face. And he then, like he told his grandfather, he told his father, he's like, he thinks he needs to tell it at church and everything.
Yeah.
And I just saw how, like, he built it up and then it all crumbling down. And in no way am I trying to, and I'm not going to mention his name, and I'm not trying to say like he's a bad individual and like, all the things he's doing are bad and like he should feel bad. But it just made me go like, yeah, everyone's kind of perception of this idea of no fap and masturbation and pornography and all those things are so kind of individualized
It's so personalized.
that it made me just kind of be like, okay, like me doing this experiment, I am treating it as like, I just want to see like what happens. I don't try to like put a super deep like I don't want to say connection to it or like importance in it. Like I'm just doing it to be like, okay, am I gonna see any benefit? Like, am I not gonna think about sex as much? Am I gonna feel more confident? Is my testosterone gonna increase?
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be cool, but like it's not super important. And also just in general, like I have not really felt the desire to masturbate. I have thought about sex a lot. Like there have been instances where I was like, man, I am alone and I would like to have a female partner, right? So like that's happened, but not like for me to, watch porn or like, masturbate by myself. So it's been interesting, right?
Well, I think, um, yeah, I mean, I really don't know how to kind of summarize what I'm thinking, but
Yeah.
I just really feel, um, like one, this is an important conversation to have with yourself. Like this is an important exploration.
Yeah.
How how you how you figure out your own kind of sexual needs, sexual desires, wants, thoughts, actions, whatever. It's worth the time to
Yeah.
kind of think about it and to process it and really really kind of go back and forth and figure out where you're at and what you think and what you believe and what's important to you and what's not important to you. I think it's like a lot of times the problem is this is a distraction and we don't
Yeah.
necessarily think about it. But at the same time, I think I really want to stress, and this is something that's kind of taking over me right now because I fought so hard against this for my whole life. But the the value of human connection, the value of human touch, the value of like being in a healthy relationship
Yeah.
is immeasurable. Like there's no way that that consuming porn or whatever it is you're doing can replace in as a healthy way as a real healthy physical, human, mental,
Yeah.
spiritual, emotional connection with other beings,
Yeah.
right? And so I guess in my kind of concluding thoughts and all this is do what you need to do, right? Take care of yourself in the best way possible.
Yeah.
Like have that search, do that work, like do what you need to do to be healthy for you at this moment, but also seek out healthy, real, intimate, positive relationships with others,
Yeah.
right? Whatever that means for you. But um and I'm sitting here saying those words and realizing that I'm being a little bit hypocritical in my own life. But um yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that because
Yeah.
we're meant to connect.
Yeah.
We're not meant to look at screens. I don't care if it's social media. I don't care if it's porn. I don't care if it's whatever. Like that's not our natural state.
Right.
We are meant to be together. We
Yeah.
are meant to mirror each other. We are meant to share moments. We are meant to like be intimate. We are meant like ah I don't
Yeah.
know. Like I feel like I'm telling other people how to live their lives right now, and I don't want to do that. But
I don't think you
but
are.
let's
I think you're
just
being hard on yourself.
let's be good to each other.
Yeah.
Let's be good to ourselves. Let's
Yeah.
be good to each other. Like
I think you should explore things. Like that's kind of what I'm doing with this challenge, whatever you want to call it, just to see like this specific topic is so individualized, right? So you need to explore various different things. That doesn't mean like, watch the craziest porn and explore that. I'm like not saying that. I'm just saying like have conversations with people you're close with that you feel you confide in. Or talk with a therapist and confide in them. Or, try something like NoFap. See if it gives you some positive benefit. Like see what works for you, right?
yeah.
We are no experts. We are not doctors. We are just two white men sitting in an apartment chatting about this. But
Well, two guys that are interested in like helping in helping,
yeah,
not telling others, but but like we just want people to live the best life that's
yeah,
possible for them,
and we're happy
whatever
to
whatever
share
that
our
means.
experiences to kind of be like, hey, these are things that like we've experienced and we've thought of, and like it's okay.
And struggled with.
Struggled with. It's okay to find humor in it. We're not trying to say that it's a good thing, but like, if it's a bad thing, you can be funny. You can find, the lightness in it. It
Yeah.
doesn't always have to be so hard on yourself because we've all struggled. Like, we talked about the stories where we got caught in some way and
Oh
like, yeah,
God.
it's the worst. It sucks so much. But it can be funny because now, in the past you can look back and laugh at it. So,
Oh,
and I have more stories I
I
could
was
I could
gonna say,
share.
can I share one more story? But
Yeah.
we're already
We're at
at
time.
time. But
Yeah. But
yeah,
we can possibly do, or I have another story that's somewhat related to this that I had recently. It's pretty funny. It and yeah, we'll see if that one makes it into an episode. But with that being said, if you ever want to share your thoughts, concerns, or let us know, how you are doing, you can reach out to us at nopeopod@gmail.com. The book is still available in the podcast description, alongside with Highland's blog, where he talks a lot about the things that go on in his life. He posts weekly every Friday, correct?
yeah,
Every Friday.
every Friday.
And the artwork is still available on our website as well, if you ever want to get some artwork from Highland. So, yeah, with that being said, we thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you guys in the next one.